Hey everyone, this is Law Gaming, and today I'm going to do a bit of a deeper dive into the naval elements of Battle Nations and how I think it can be improved in future updates of the game. Starting off, naval units were first added in the 4.5 patch, which was released in November of 2014. This was one of the largest single updates in the history of the game. It added new classes of units, new storylines, factions, and areas to explore. Unknown to players at the time, only a few short months later, in February of 2015, Z2 would be acquired by King. After being acquired, Z2 would release two more updates to the game that expanded further on the naval elements of the game, that being the 4.7 patch in March of 2015, which added a ton more missions, 45 to be exact, and added the repeatable Dreadnought fight alongside several new playable units to the naval roster. Later, we got the 4.8 patch in May of 2015, which really just added the Kraken as another repeatable boss fight that was in the naval part of the game. And we didn't know this at the time, but that would be the final major content update to Battle Nations. And a little bit over a year after that released, the original Battle Nations was shut down in June of 2016. This points to a crucial fact. The naval aspect of Battle Nations was the least fleshed out aspect of the game, due to it being released around the same time as Z2 being acquired and shuttered by King. Naval has a number of issues that have been inherited in the current iteration of Battle Nations. The first issue that I see with Naval is that it is a resource sink that is unlocked at an especially early state of the game at level 25. The units cost a lot of tier 2 resources and use up bars and gears, which are precious and hard to get at level 25, especially for players that aren't exactly aware of the best ways to play the game, the best ways of grinding in the game. It adds a big resource sink that they're going to have to sink a lot of time and effort into that might turn them off from the game a little more, especially in those crucial early stages. It's going to make it a lot more difficult for some of those players that aren't careful with spending their resources, and we've already seen this with several players in the beta soft-locking themselves because they wasted their bars instead of spending them on the destroyers that they were supposed to. Also, a lot of missions in the naval campaign requires a lot of resource donations and or using up a lot of resources at the various shops. That can definitely take away from some of the other parts of the game that are going on at the same time and make it a little bit more difficult to grind for certain things. The second issue that I see is that the current number of naval units, both the player's units and the enemy units, are limited. This leads to a lot of repetitive fights and encounters and limits the strategies to using basically the M10, the R1, and buoys, with a smaller niche for some things like the subs and the destroyers, and things like the gunboat being utterly useless in the current meta of naval. Later on, if and when we get the boss strikes added back to the game, and maybe also promo units, we're going to have some more options for naval fights, such as the Bora Bora hovercraft, the number of airplanes in the game that are usable in naval fights, and also we'll have a couple of naval boss strike reward units. But in the long run, we need more viable units that are trainable in the dry dock and other places if possible. So this brings me to a few suggestions on how we can help balance out this part of the game, make it a little bit more fun for players. So first of all, smaller suggestion here, I think we should buff the playable Reef Bandit units. The jet ski and the powerboat aren't very good. They don't need the crazy buff, maybe a little bit more damage, maybe a little bit more dodge. Also, I think that the powerboat, especially the playable unit, should be somewhat more like the enemy version. Give it a more powerful attack with a higher crit chance. I don't think it would be crazy overpowered, considering we already have the M10, which is pretty dang overpowered. Another thing that they could do is add a trainable Reef Bandit tug, maybe in the level 40 or so. And this, if it's given good stats, could be pretty viable in the long run. And another thing they could do is consider making some of the promotional unit and boss strike units that are either naval or these hybrid units like the Bora Bora hovercraft available either just as boss strike units in some of the first couple boss strikes, or making it available early on as a promotional unit, which will give us a little bit more of a variety as players, or making a couple of them into normal units. I could see possibly like the naval trooper, the mini sub, or maybe the mine layer being turned into normal playable units one way or another, but that might be a little controversial because they were boss strike units before, but that's just one suggestion that I have. Also, another issue I think is the encounters could use some more variety, especially giving the player more reasons to use units other than the M10. The first thing is they need to add the coastal battles, which are in the game and they're really cool. So you get a fight against the Sovereign Navy they have like 2 slots on their side with like to put down a land unit of some kind, whether it be a tank killer or whatnot. Make those exact same encounters, but flip it so that the players can use the land side of the battle. I think that'll give us some interesting interactions between the land units and the naval units, especially for some vehicles. There's a tag in every single unit whether or not an attack can hit the ships and the subs, and I think it only makes sense to incorporate that actually into the actual game, with a lot of these land units actually being able to interact with the naval units. And that'll also make the 2 parts of the game a little less siloed. I think a big issue with the naval aspects of the game is they're kind of like a weird peripheral or parallel portion of Battle Nations. There's not like a lot of connection between your navy and your army, which kind of makes sense, but I think it would be a little more interesting if building up your navy or building up your army can serve one another in some way. And another suggestion that I have is maybe adding some sort of coastal or shadow water encounters, which don't allow the larger ships like the M10 or any of the battleships or the destroyer, only allowing smaller vessels like the gunboat, the powerboat, the navy trooper, the jet ski, and whatnot. Things like that. Maybe, I don't know, they could be on a river or a lake where, larger boats would never be able to go into, but you could use some of these smaller vessels. I think that would be fun, and they've already had some of these battles where you're limited. Either you could only use infantry or you can't use certain units, and I think this would be kind of a good extension of that. That might add a reason to use things like the gunboat because, well, it makes sense. You'd use those in shallower waters than a giant destroyer or a battleship. And also, lastly, I think that they definitely should consider adding more original naval units. The M10 and the R1 are basically like if you unlock the mega tank and the heavy tank at the very beginning of the game, you'd almost have no reason to really bother with a lot of other units, even though they're still fun to use and have their own purposes. So I think they can branch out. Maybe later on, they could add a more powerful variation of not the M10, but a more powerful battleship, or they could add just more units, more options to let us branch out and find our own play styles, because that's what's fun about Battle Nations. So tell me what you all think about what I've been talking about with Naval. What do you think of it as a part of the game? Do you like my suggestions? And what other suggestions do you have for the naval aspects of Battle Nations? Leave your comments down below, and if you've enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.